welcome to another video from eGIS Associates. So I think we're ready to actually start building our computer. So we're going to do that today. Bear in mind, this is the first computer I've built from scratch in a long time. So I'm sure I'm going to hit some bumps in the road as we go through this. I'll try to be as thorough as possible explaining what I'm doing and how we're doing it. But there may be some retakes and things as we go forward with this. But I'm really excited about doing this. Like I said, it's been a long time since I've built them. I've built a lot of computers in the past. I used to work for an engineering company, and we built our own custom workstations for running AutoCAD software and similar type of applications. So I've done a lot of this, but like I said, it's just been a long time. So let's get started, kick things off. So typically when you're starting a new build, you want to start with assembling the main components that go on the motherboard before you put it in the case. This gives you room to work and can make sure that things fit before you get too far. So we're going to go ahead and pull our motherboard out. Again, as you're doing this, make sure you're on a non-conductive surface as you're putting these things together. So pulling out what I might need, the manual, just in case I have questions, and put this all back in here. Now, as I mentioned in the unboxing video, one of probably the easiest or best surfaces to use if you're not sure is the box that the motherboard came in itself. It's cardboard. Cardboard doesn't conduct electricity. So other things you can do to prevent, possible damage to your components, as I mentioned before, they actually have grounding straps you can put around your arm that you connect to some piece of metal, maybe the case or something, to again dissipate any electrical charge, static that you build up. You can also make sure you touch something metal before you start touching these, and of course you want to make sure that, as I said, that you're not on a conductive surface, like a metal table. That's not a good thing to do. So again, building it on here, I should be good. I'll touch some metal. I've got the case over here. Touch it just to make sure, and see how we go. Okay, so I'll pull this out here, and we'll start doing the build. Now I'm going to quickly move the camera over here, hopefully, so you can get a better idea of what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So give me a second to get the camera positioned, and we'll continue. So, okay, hopefully you can see everything now. So the first step we're going to go ahead and do is put our processor into its socket. Again, remember when you're building these that if you're building Intel based systems, you're going to have a different socket type for your processor than what you have for the AMD Ryzen series. So this is an AM4 socket, which is specifically designed for the Ryzen processor. So to install this, we need to raise this little arm that's on the socket. You just kind of pull it out to the side slightly and then lift it up. So that opens up the socket to accept the processor. And go back and now pull our processor out of our box here and get it out. And let's see, I'm not sure if you can see this, but we're going to try to get it out of this clamshell here very carefully. Don't want to drop the processor. Now it's important as you're taking the processor out of here that you don't mess with these pins that are on the bottom. You don't want to touch those. They are very sensitive, can be damaged pretty easily. You want to try to avoid touching the top if possible. It's not like the end of the world if you accidentally touch it. But then also you'll see here is a arrow that you want to match up with the arrow on your motherboard to sit this down in here. and it should just seat right in. You shouldn't have to apply any pressure to it. It should just drop in. Once it's in there, you just bring the arm down, lock that back into place, and now your processor has been installed. The next thing that I'm going to install is my memory. Pardon me while I open the package with the memory in it. And as I said before, we're going with the G-Skill Ripsaw memory. This is the DDR4 3000. This motherboard will take faster memory, but this is a good speed. I think it'll go, the motherboard itself will go up to, anyway, as I was saying, the motherboard will go up to, I think, 3600 memory. So I'm going to pull the sticks out. Very nice little crimson color. Did that in honor of my wife, who is a big Roll Tide fan. And no, she was not happy about the college championship game with Clemson. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So we've got our memory out. Now, one of the things I want to do is make sure I put them into the right slots. As you can see, I've got 4 slots here that I can put the memory into. And because I've got the 2 chips, I need to put them in dual channel fashion so I get the most, as we were talking about earlier. So I'm going to look in the manual to make sure I put these. I think it's B2 and A2, but I want to make sure. Okay, so I've consulted the manual and we want to put it in A2 and B2. So this bank of slots is B and this bank of slots is A. So we want to go B2 and A2. Now, one of the things you want to make sure as you're installing the memory, that you pull these little catches, whatever you want to call them, back so you can slip your memory in. Now, some other boards, they have these little catches on both sides. This particular one just has the one on this side that we need to pull back. So we're going to take our Ripsaw memory here, and you'll notice that there is a notch right there that you need to line up with the slot. And so you just put it into here. And once you get it in, you just push it in. When you hear that click, it's locked into place. And now we're going to go to the next slot up here and push that memory into place. Okay, so we've gone ahead and installed our CPU. We've got our G-Skill memory in. The next thing I'm going to go ahead and put in is our NVMe hard drive. So, or drive, not really hard drive. So again, the Samsung 970 EVO. So the 500 gigabyte drive that we're going to put in here. So let's get it opened up. And you can take a look at this. So you can see this is actually a drive, as opposed to the traditional hard drive we're looking at. So it's going to go right into here. So we got to take off this heat shield or here. So I've got a screwdriver right here, and we've got to undo. Oops, let's get a different bit. That one's too big. So I'm going to undo this screw right here. Is that out? And get the screw out, and then we have to undo this one too. whole thing connected? Maybe it is. You know, this probably would have all been easier if I'd actually read the manual on this part about how to take this out. Oh, and yep, there's another screw underneath it, so. There we go. So we take that heat sink out, you can see it's got the thermal pad underneath. We'll need to remove this coating or this layer, not the whole pad. You don't want to do that. But you can see here we've got the socket for the drive. So this is going to go in here, and then we're going to have to put in a standoff and a screw where that goes. And that's what these are. I'll open this up. So we got our stand. This is what supports this. I just want to make sure I get it in the right. Looks like it goes into this one right here. These do come in different sizes. I'll put that in. No need to super tighten it, so just slide this into the socket like so. Get one of the little screws out. There we go. Screw that in. Again, not don't have to go too hard on that. So now we're gonna remove this film. You can see it says to remove it. What that does is allows the thermal pad to connect with, there we go, with the drive there. So put that in and get the screws in place. Oops, come on, get them there. Okay. So there we've got that installed. Okay, let's see. Now that we've got our NVMe drive in, I think the next thing to put in is our CPU cooler. Make sure I'm getting this other stuff out of the way. I'll lose it. Well, our cooler here, that's the fan controller. Okay, that's for the fan, and then it looks like this has RGB on it, so I think. Okay, so now I'm going to get this in for the RGB. controller. So looks like there's okay. So for those that can't, I'm not sure if you can see this, but we've got places here. You don't have to plug this in, but if you want RGB controls and then you want to be able to control it, you plug that into a USB connector. Apparently the coffee's done for the day. I'll plug that in, slides in. Now we're going to put our cooler in here. So there's our fan. That'll go to the smart controller on board, and then this one will plug in to an RGB header, which I'll have to find in a well, that'll end up plugging in right there. Right, so I'll have to manage that cable. And so we're going to put this so that side goes there. We take this and lower it down onto that part right there. So we've got our cooler on, and then we flip this little switch here to lock it down in place, and this takes a good bit of effort to get that position down. So now that's got our cooler down on our CPU. Going to connect this up, our RGB header on the motherboard. How that goes, go. So this RGB stuff is new to me, so I'm just gonna, it matters how it goes on there. Okay, okay, so that's on there. Exactly what I'm gonna do with this. Here for now. But we'll cable manage that later. And I said this will go over to our smart controller in our case. So there we've got the motherboard pretty much assembled, and we're ready to put it in our case. So that's the next step. Okay, so now that we have the motherboard mostly assembled, we're ready to go put it in our case. So I've got our NZXT case laid over here. So this is where the motherboard is going to go. We've already got our standoffs in place for the motherboard. So that's ready. The standoffs keep the back of the motherboard off the metal of the case, so we avoid any connections there that we're not intending. So we're going to take our motherboard here, and you want to make sure your I/O matches up with the slot in the case for the I/O to fit through. And we're going to bring this in here. You can use, and I'm going to, the cooler to get things lined up, and there we go. Okay, so now we've got the motherboard in place. It is time to screw it down, and I had those screws here. Here we go. So there's like 6 screws that get involved with this, so we'll start putting those in now. Okay, so now you can see that we have the motherboard installed in the case. Now we're going to start hooking up some of the connectors into from the case to the motherboard, and then we'll get the power supply installed and start getting its cables run and continuing on with the rest of the build. So give me a second, we're going to flip the case up, and I've got to move the camera once again. Thank you. Okay, so now you can see we've got our case stood up, and I've started running a few of the cables. So if you can see it over there, we've got our front panel connector plugged in, and then over here we've got our HD audio for our front panel mic and headphones jacks connected, and all of that is coming again from the case, so that over here you'll see all these wires coming down and out here. So these are all case connections. This spaghetti of wires here goes up to that smart controller for our various fans that will be used in cooling. We've also got a USB 3 connector here, USB 2 connectors here. I actually have 2 of those. So we're getting all of those connected to the spots that are there on the motherboard as identified. So we're going to keep going through that. And then once we get those connected, we'll work on getting the power supply installed. Okay, so we've made some more progress in here. We've gotten our USB connector. So we have our Type 3 connector here, which takes us up to the ports on the top of the case. And then we have our USB 2 connectors in there that we've got, again, to, well, one goes to the port on the top of the case. The other one is going around to a, what do they call this, internal USB hub from NZXT. You can see that I've got that here, and it's magnetic, so it'll just, go into the case and stay. What this does is give us additional USB connectors, and I've realized my motherboard only had 2 connectors on it, and I actually needed 3. One for the smart controller in the case, and then of course the 2 USB 2 ports that are on the case itself. So went ahead and got this. As you can see, it's got room for other expansion, so if we add other components in the future, we've got some room to do that with. So now we're going to go on and start working on getting the power supply in and figuring out the cabling we're going to need for that. So we'll pull that out, and then once I get it figured out and laid out, we'll come back in and I'll show that to you. Okay, so we're working here on our power supply, and I've gone through and I've kind of figured out what I need as far as power cables connected. Again, this is a semi-modular power supply, so we know we've got our primary 24 pin power connector here, but there's other power needs that we've got to get in here, so you can see all the various plugs in the back that can do that. So I know obviously we're going to have a CPU, so I've got a CPU, there we go, CPU cable here. So we'll take it and we plug it in where it says CPU 1, and it can only go in one way, so we're going to plug that in so we know we've got that cable for us. I know that we're going to have obviously SATA drives in there, plus the controller on the case needs a SATA connection. I think I can get by with the one single cable. If not, I can always add another one. But to keep the number of cables down, I'm just going to try to put in the one. So we'll put this into our SATA 1 connection down here. It's plugged in. It doesn't really matter where you plug it. I grew up with an engineer, so I try to match up, if it's the first one, it should be 1, right? I also know that eventually we're going to have a video card in here that's going to require power. Like I said, we're planning to, when it comes out, put the an RTX 2060 card in here. Don't have one of those right yet. It doesn't come out till the 15th, and so I don't have it on hand. But for future use, I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. So this is going to be our VGA connector. Now, some video cards, if you get some of the higher end cards like the Titan or the 2080, and I think even some of the 2070s, and there's others, may actually require two power plugs. They may need both of them. So again, you have to check out and make sure you know what you got. So I've got my one, the 2060 only has the one power connection, we're good. Now the other thing I know I need for that USB hub that I put in there, I'm going to need a Molex connector. So this is a Molex connector, an old style one. So I've got one of those here, came with power supply. This is a peripheral. So I'm going to plug it in over here to the spot where it says peripheral 1, plug that in. So that's got all my cables that I should need power-wise for my system. So the next thing, is to now mount this in the case. So we've got this nice bracket that comes out. They are thumb screws, but they are very tight. So I'm going to use a screwdriver here to at least get these loosened. So I can actually use them as thumb screws like they're intended. Okay, so that should be loose enough. I should be able to just unscrew these. Okay, so then I'm going to take this and just mount it, get this out of the way, to the front of my power supply here. Now you want to make sure that when you mount this on here that well, it depends on your case. In this, I want to put there's a fan down here. I want to put it so it's blowing down through this grate, and that's usually the best way to do it. If your case has some obstruction down here, or it sits directly on the ground or something like that, then you may want to flip the power supply so the fan is facing up. This case is the top of the power supply bay is perforated, so it's got good airflow, so it could work that way, but generally best practice is to point it down. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to go ahead and mount this on here, and let's see if I can get this going. Okay folks, so hopefully now you can see we've got all of our screws into our bracket. Now it's time to put the power supply into the case. So we're gonna slide the case around so you can see. So it's going to slide into this area right here. What I'm going to do is kind of feed the spaghetti through here, get it all down and through. Go ahead and take this off the main power unit. Make sure we get all this through so that as we push this, we can grab all of this mess and make sure we're not picking anything up. We're getting that pushed in. And there we go. Now we're going to do our thumb screws tightened up. And that Got the, make sure I got that. Again, you know, anytime you're building, there's no need to over torque these things. I just want to make sure they're tight. Nothing worse than the power supply falling out on you because you didn't tighten the screws. You had a screw loose. So there you have it. You can see we've got our power supply in here. The other thing you can see there's the I/O shield that comes off the motherboard with all of its ports, and you can see the fan back here. So we've got our power supply installed. Here is our on-off switch, and of course where the power cable plugs in. So that's done. So next step, let's see, what should we do next? I'm thinking we put in our other, and mount in our other hard drives. So that's what we're going to do. There are a lot of mounting options. Whoops, sorry about that, should pick this up better. A lot of mounting options for hard drives. So I have one standard 3.5 inch 7200 RPM SATA drive. So down here the case has these hard drive I don't know, baskets, whatever you want to call them, trays. That's the word I was looking for, trays here. Then I have trays for the smaller ones up here. So thinking I'm going to put the small SSD up here, and then the 7200 RPM down here in one of these trays. Obviously, it's the only place it can go. But by putting both of those on the back, it makes it easy for the cables that I need, the SATA cables and whatnot, to make sure they all reach where they're supposed to go. Okay, so that should work. And you know, there are other options. The case actually comes with several trays like this. So I could have mounted, you know, the SSD on the front side of the case there in several positions. So a lot of options as far as where you want to put these things. They actually make hard drives now that are RGB enabled, so they actually will light up for you. To mine, I didn't get those for that, so I don't really care if people see my hard drive. So let's go ahead and move on to that and go ahead and get the drives out and screwed into where they need to be. These trays, by the way, come out down here. So you kind of got a lot of mess in here. Let me go ahead and pull that out. But there's thumb screws right down here for sliding those trays out. So you just loosen them and it slides out. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. Okay, so after some doing, we got everything hooked up in here now. So you can see our SSD SATA drive here. We've got our SATA power cable and our SATA data cable plugged in. This one goes around to the motherboard, and this one's coming from the power supply. If you've never done this before, don't worry about all these cable connections. The one thing I found in going through this whole process is these things are pretty foolproof. They only fit one way. So in the case of the SATA cables here, they're kind of got an L shape to them. So you match the L to the L and it slides right in. So don't worry about misaligning cables or anything of that nature. It fits in right there. Up under here, under this kind of spaghetti, is our 7200 RPM traditional platter drive back there. It's a 1 terabyte drive. So we've got that in. And we've got all of our, so here's our power connector that goes up to for our CPU on our motherboard. This is the fan connector for the cooler up there. We've got room for plenty of other fans. So again, if we wanted to add a water cooling solution, we've got plenty of room to do that. We've got more room for additional hard drives back here. And I've tried to manage cables as best I can. For any of you professional computer builders, system builders, please be kind. It's been a long time. And back when I first started doing this, or last time I did this, cable management wasn't as big a concern as it is now. But I tried to get things kind of cleaned up so we can get our back on here. And I think everything will fit pretty nicely once we get the back on. So from the front side, we'll go ahead and turn this around. So you can see the front side. The front looks really fairly clean. I'll do something to tidy this up here in just a second. I'll get some cable ties to do that. But you can see here's our main power connector coming in to our 24-pin connection on the motherboard. We've got all the various connections in here on the front of that. So again, our audio is over here. Here is our USB 2 connections right here, our USB 3 connections there, and here's our front panel connections that go to the buttons on the top for the power and letting you know the hard drive's connected, yada yada, that kind of thing. So we've got all that. Here's where the SATA data cables come in and connect to the motherboard for both of the hard drives in there. And then again, we have this module right here for the internal USB hub. So we've got this, this is connecting it to the motherboard here, and then this is connection to the controller, the smart controller in the case. So we've got that in there. So it'll be able to help control all of our fans and keep our temperatures nice. I've actually heard some kind of mixed reviews about the smart controller in here. So I'm going to take a look for it myself. The last thing we need to install in here is our video card. As I said, we don't have the primary one in here, so I'm not going to really show you how to put it in, but right now our stand-in is going to be this one. So we'll get it installed. It should install in this slot right here, and then we'll be done. So once I get this installed, we'll try to boot it up and see how it goes. So let me get this put in. So there you have it. Our system is now built, and hopefully it will all work. So that'll kind of be our next video, showing it all up and working and whatnot. But I think we have it. We have built our system. You can see the video card in there now. And so I said, next is to test it. Let's see how it works. So we got her hooked up to power. We have our first signs of life. You see the RGB going back there on the motherboard, so that's a good sign. Now let's hit the power button and see what happens. That's good. Fans coming, RGB on the fans there. Now let's see if we can get it to post. Okay, so we've got it to post. We're into the BIOS now, and we're going to start playing with some settings. I will have to play with this a little bit to figure out exactly what we need to do on it. But yeah, so it seems to be working. I'm very excited to have it up and working. So there's our build, and yay us. First computer in a long time, and it seems to be working. So very good, very excited to finally have everything up and running. One other thing I did want to mention, to get the RGB that's on the cooler you see there working, I had to, the cable on there, the connector that goes on the header on the motherboard, there is an arrow on the cable. And that arrow indicates the 12 volt, where the 12 volt power connection is. So you need to make sure that you match that up with whatever motherboard you're doing and know where that is. So I just wanted to throw that out to you. So I'm going to go have fun trying to play with the BIOS. And if you've enjoyed this series, let us know if you want to see more. Do keep in mind that this is my very first computer build. And they make it look so easy online as Tech Tips and JZ 2 Cents and Bitwits and others, Paul's Hardware and whatever, to do this. Filming it, that is. The build wasn't too hard. But anyway, just thought I would share that with you. And with that, again, if you like what you see, please make sure to become a patron of our channel. We'll provide a link for that down in the description. I'll also try to put a link to all of the components as well as PC Part Picker in there, so you can go check out all the various parts and pieces we used in this build. So with that, see y'all in the next video. Have a good one.